Picture this: a slab of solid limestone, cut so perfectly it doesn't have a single crack. It weighs over 1,000 tons. That's heavier than two fully loaded 747s stacked. And it's sitting in a quarry in modern-day Lebanon, exactly where it was left over 2,000 years ago. Here's the crazy part. If you dropped that same stone in front of a modern construction crew today, with cranes, with bulldozers, with every piece of tech we've got, they would struggle. Some engineers will tell you straight up, we're not 100% sure how we'd move it either. So stick with me here, because I'm not going to tell you aliens did this. I'm going to tell you something way creepier. We did it. Regular humans with ropes and wood and pure genius pulled off something we've basically forgotten how to do. And by the end of this video, you're going to look at ancient and primitive as two words that never should have been in the same sentence. Let's go to Baalbek, Lebanon. There's a stone here nicknamed the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, not because of what it looks like, because of how long the legend says it takes to move it, as long as it takes a woman to carry a baby to term. That's the myth that grew up around it, because nobody could explain it any other way. Now imagine you're a stone cutter in 27 BC. No trucks, no steel cables, just you, a few thousand other guys, some timber, some rope, and a deadline from a guy who's basically a god king. You're told, cut that out of the bedrock and move it there. What does that feel like? I mean, really feel like. Your hands are raw. You're doing this in the heat, day after day, for a monument you might never even see finished. There's no calling in sick. One mistake, and that stone doesn't just fall, it kills everyone standing near it. And yet, they did it. They quarried a piece of rock heavier than a modern battleship's gun turret, and they moved it with what basically amounts to teamwork and physics they figured out through trial and error, stuff we're still reverse engineering with computer models today. Here's the twist, though. That stone in the quarry, the 1,000-ton one, it was never even moved. It's still sitting there, half-cut, abandoned. Which raises a question that should honestly keep you up at night. What went wrong? And what did they know that made them even attempt it in the first place? That question? That's the thread we're pulling on today, because I promise you, it gets weirder. Now, before we go further, I need you to hold on to that image of the abandoned stone, because later in this video, I'm going to show you the tool they might have used to move stones like this, and it's simpler than anything in your garage right now. It's almost embarrassingly simple, and that's exactly why we lost it. We've all seen the documentaries, grainy reenactments of primitive man grunting and dragging rocks with sticks. Hollywood loves that image because it's simple. It makes us feel superior sitting here with our smartphones. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That image is basically a lie. The people who built Baalbek, who raised the pyramids, who carved Pumapunku in Bolivia with joints so tight you can't slide a credit card between the stones, these weren't cavemen banding rocks together. These were engineers. They understood geometry, load distribution, and materials well enough to build structures that have survived earthquakes, empires, and 2,000+ years of weather, and are still standing, while some of our modern buildings crack after 40 years. Think about that for a second. We build with rebar and steel and computer-modeled stress tests, and our stuff has an expiration date. They built with rope, wood, and raw human coordination and made things that outlast civilizations. So who's really the primitive one here? This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. It's not that ancient humans had help from aliens. It's that ancient humans had a level of coordinated hands-on genius that modern society, with all our conveniences, has actually lost, not gained, lost. And that word lost is the scariest part of this whole story, because it's not just old tools we lost. Stick around, because in a minute, I'm going to show you exactly how a society can hold the secret to moving a 1,000-ton stone, and then, within a couple generations, forget it completely. It's happened before, and some historians think it could happen to knowledge we depend on right now. Okay, let's get into the how, because this is where it gets good. Modern experiments, actual hands-on tests by archaeologists and engineers, have shown that ancient builders likely used a method that sounds almost too simple to work. wooden sledges, wet sand, and teams of men pulling in perfect rhythm. Here's the wild part. Egyptian tomb paintings show a guy standing on the front of the sledge, pouring water onto the sand right in front of it. For decades, people thought that was just ceremonial. Then, physicists actually tested it in a lab. Turns out, wetting the sand cuts the friction in half, literally halves the amount of manpower needed to drag something. These weren't priests doing a ritual, they were doing applied physics thousands of years before physics was even a word. Now picture being one of those workers. You don't know the word friction, you just know that when the water hits the sand, the rope stops fighting you. Somebody, generations before you, discovered that by watching, testing, failing, and trying again. And that knowledge got passed down like sacred fire because it was that valuable. It was the difference between finishing the pharaoh's tomb or getting executed for failing him. That's not luck, that's not aliens, that's humanity at its most resourceful, solving an impossible problem with what was sitting right in front of them. And for stones like Baalbek's monolith, many researchers now believe massive teams, potentially thousands of workers, used a combination of these sledges, lever systems, and earthen ramps built up gradually, inch by inch, moving the stone maybe a few feet a day. Slow, brutal, genius. But here's where the story turns dark. Because this incredible knowledge, sand, sledges, ramps, rhythm, it wasn't written in a textbook. It lived in the hands and memory of master builders. And when that generation died, or when an empire collapsed, or a city got sacked, the knowledge just vanished. Nobody wrote the instruction manual because they never imagined a world where nobody would remember. And that's exactly why, hundreds of years later, people would stand in front of these ruins and think the only explanation left was it must have been gods, or aliens, or magic. This is the part I really want you to sit with. We treat ancient like it's a synonym for worse than us. But the truth is, entire bodies of hands-on human knowledge, insanely sophisticated, tested over generations knowledge, have been erased from history simply because nobody wrote it down, or the people who knew it died before passing it on. And before you think, well, that could never happen now, we have the internet, ask yourself, how much of what keeps modern society running is actually understood by the average person? How many of us could rebuild a power grid from scratch, farm without machines? We're more dependent on inherited knowledge than ever. We just don't notice because it hasn't broken yet. The people who moved 1,000-ton stones weren't primitive. They were proof of what humans are capable of when survival depends on figuring it out. And the fact that we lost that ability, that should scare you a little, because it means brilliance isn't permanent. It has to be protected and passed on, or it disappears, just like it did for them. So here's what I want to know from you. If you had to guess, what do you think is the biggest piece of impossible ancient knowledge we've completely lost? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I might make a whole video digging into your top pick. And if this kind of stuff messes with your head a little, the idea that ancient doesn't mean less advanced, it might mean advanced in ways we can't even measure yet, hit subscribe. Because next week, I'm covering a 90-ton stone lid in Peru that modern lasers still can't replicate the cut on. And trust me, it's even weirder than this one. Because the real mystery was never, did ancient humans have help? The real mystery is, how much of our own genius are we one collapse away from forgetting?